here puts campus safety as one of their #1 priorities. I know I certainly do. Students and faculty will be very happy to know that George Mason was ranked 12th safest campus in the United States by alerts.org. This is a great achievement for the university. But campus officials and board members wish to make George Mason safer. One idea that's occasionally thrown out is the idea of incorporating the emergency blue light system onto campus. What I'm here to tell you is why George Mason should not have this emergency system on its campus. First, I'm going to tell you what the blue light system is, why George Mason doesn't need it, and then I'm going to start to tell you why it would be worse for George Mason to actually incorporate it than just not have it at all. After that, I'm going to give a little bit of alternatives for what George Mason University can have done instead of incorporating this blue light system. So let's get right into it, what the blue light system actually is. So it's a series of these things, little towers, scattered across the campus. They're blue, of course, as the name denominates, and they have blue lights on the top that you can easily see at night. What it is that it's a singular button on the tower. You go up to it, you press the button, it sends a signal straight to dispatch. They then send an officer out to that location and make sure that whatever emergency that you have is taken care of. Some of them even now incorporate microphone and like kind of oratory use, so you can actually talk to dispatch. They can then talk to the police officer that's going to arrive at the scene, inform them what's going to happen, what the situation is, so that they are better mentally prepared for what they need to look out for, so they're not just kind of arriving in blind. Even furthermore, some cameras, depending on the some towers, depending on the college, have cameras incorporated into them, so they can actually see what's happening around the tower, which raises some privacy concerns by some officials. Others think it's a good idea because they can dispatch can visually see what's happening, can use it in recording as a case in like court or some sort. So it all depends on your view with that. On paper, this idea sounds really, really good. You know, it works well. In your head, it sounds like it works well. I'm going to tell you kind of how it really doesn't. So I'm going to be using University of Maryland as kind of an example. University of Maryland is, of course, a state college in Maryland. It's slightly larger than George Mason. It has 28,000 undergraduate students. George Mason has 23,000. And it holds host to the emergency blue light system. The thing is that kind of shows how much George Mason really doesn't need the system is the fact that despite University of Maryland having this, they still have double the amount of violent crime on campus, even though they really don't have that many students compared to what George Mason has. This shows just how safe it is, and the fact that the blue light system doesn't really prevent crime, but more it's just another way of informing the police that a crime has happened. So it doesn't really help make the campus safer, it just makes another means of contacting the police that something has happened. Kind of the real major reason for why George Mason should incorporate this is the fact that it's widely ignored by criminals who still do the act despite having these blue light systems around, and by students it's widely ignored. But I don't mean ignored in the fact that they just kind of walk by it and like don't mind it. I mean they ignore the fact that they don't use them. Students and faculty are unsure of how the blue light systems actually work. They're not sure where the call goes, what will happen with the call, if there's someone even there to pick up the line, if the system works itself, like the tower. So most don't use it. The other thing is that many students and faculty are put off by the name of the system, causing them to not use it. They are put off by the emergency part of the emergency blue light system. Many feel that their emergency itself is not actually emergency enough to warrant pressing the button, so they don't. Instead, they opt to use their cell phones to call, talk to the police, and do it that way. This goes on to such an extent that the University of Colorado Boulder announced that they had 235 calls through a single year, calls to their campus police. 21 of those calls came from the blue light system. That means that out of every 11 emergency calls to the police, only one of those was from a blue light tower. See, the reason for this is the fact that students and faculty almost all now carry cell phones. Back when these were popular in the 90s, cell phones were not as big, so the blue light system was a necessary source for contacting the police. Now, you can call in your pocket. So I said earlier, you're probably questioning still, why did I say that it would be worse for George Mason to have the blue light system on campus than not have it at all? The reason for this is that it's very, very expensive. A single unit to install, so a single one of those towers in that picture I showed earlier, costs between $2,000 and $5,000, depending on the amount of technology put into it. To put that into perspective, University of Maryland has over 100 around campus. The price adds up very, very quickly. The other thing is that they cost a ton to repair. Every year, money has to get put in to fix the systems itself, make sure they still work, the lights work, that sort of thing. University of Colorado reported that they spent $36,000 annually to repair their blue light system. Put that in perspective, University of Colorado is roughly 600 acres in size. George Mason is over 800 acres. The price for George Mason would be higher because we would have more units to have to cover the entirety of the campus, and it would just kind of inflate the cost of the whole thing. The other cost component goes with the upgrading of the actual systems themselves. As technology evolves, you have to upgrade the systems so that they're more efficient, that incorporate the new technologies so that they actually they work better, that sort of thing. Contra Costa Community College recently spent $100,000 upgrading their system to make it more modern. An incredibly expensive endeavor, and kind of why we don't really need them. So, after I've gone over this kind of reasons why George Mason doesn't need it and how it'd be worse for us to have it, a lot of people are wondering, well, what can we have on campus instead of this? Like, what can we do to improve the safety of the campus? So, some things that we can do is, one, better lighting system as we around kind of the streets and such, the walkways. When night falls, George Mason can get very, very, very dark. With all the woods and stuff, just kind of, you'll have your dimly lit sidewalk. Off to your right, you just have this drop off into the woods that you can't see anything. Having more streetlights, brighter streetlights around George Mason campus will make the campus feel safer and deter nighttime crime, because people who are committing these crimes will realize that they are more easily seen, and that it will kind of dissuade them for doing it because they don't have shadows to hide in. Another thing that can make the campus feel safer and actually be safer would be to push having more kind of information given on the Rave Guardian app. What this is it's a campus security app that connects you to George Mason Police. So as you open it, there's several buttons. The bottom two, the one on the left is, you hit it, it directly calls the George Mason Campus Police. On the right, 911 is if you're just calling like the regular police. Another feature that this has is that it allows you to kind of set a timer, and you can buddy up with what are called your guardians, so your friends, your suite mates, your floor mates, the people you live with. And what it does is, when the timer runs out, say you're walking to like West Campus or something, you set the timer. When the timer runs out, it sends a message to the people who are your guardians that you had never turned this off and that you might not have gotten to where you wanted to go safely. So they can, from there, call you, contact you, see what's wrong, that sort of thing. It also has a GPS component, so it uses your location, so it can kind of like, you can find your friends with that. Another option would be to increase the amount of police presence on campus, being foot patrol and bike patrol, like up in the picture. what this would help is the fact that you would be more visually seeing the people protecting you, patrolling the campus. It would make it feel safer because these police officers are actually there visually, and it would deter more crime because these police officers are visually walking around, actively scanning for possible problems or criminals and such. A final option that is kind of a way of using the blue light system, but not to the same extent as which was usually proposed, would be in more isolated areas of the campus, such as the West Campus parking lot, would be to have call boxes. So, like a singular box, a telephone, pick it up, it calls you directly to campus police, so that in these isolated areas, if there is an incident where you don't have your phone, you can still have a contact for the police, while be cheaper than having this huge expanding blue light system. Just several call boxes, maybe one or two in the West Campus parking, maybe one or two in President's Park, and in other possible isolated campuses. So, I thank you all for listening, and I hope that you learned something from my TED Talk presentation, and I hope that you continue to help make George Mason safer. So, thank you.